evening, and welcome. Tonight, I'm going to be reading Beowulf to you. Beowulf the Warrior. I am doing this because we are going to spend about a week and a half up in Scandinavia in my Countries of the World series. And I just think Beowulf is a fitting book to read to you. It is a very ancient poem written in, I believe, Anglo-Saxon of some kind. I left the window open tonight. Now there's all these little bugs everywhere. I apologize. In Anglo-Saxon, like very ancient. So it's an English translation of that. And yeah, it takes place in the ancient times, mostly in Sweden and Denmark. And it's a story about monsters and about Beowulf the hero who slays them. This book is very old. The cover has fallen off. It was my mom's book that she bought in the 60s and passed down to me, so it's very old sounding. So set the cover side. Part 1 is Grendel, part 2 is Grendel's mother, and part 3 is the fire dragon. Let's read about Beowulf, starting here. Hrothgar, king of the Danes, glorious in battle, built him a huge hall, its gleaming roof towering high to heaven, strong to withstand the buffet of war. He called it Heorot, and lived there with his queen. At time of feasting, he gave to his followers rings and ornaments and bracelets of bright gold, cunningly wrought, graved with runes and deeds of dead heroes. Here they enjoyed feasts and high fellowship, story and song, and the pride of armed peace. But away in the treacherous fens beyond the moor, a hideous monster lurked. Fiend from hell, misbegotten son of a foul mother, Grendel his name, hating the sound of the harp, the minstrel song, the bold merriment of men, in whose distorted likeness he was shaped, twice 6 feet tall, with arms of hairy gorilla, and red ferocious eyes and ravening jaws. He one night, when the warriors of Hrothgar lay slumbering after banquet, came to Heorot, broke down the door, seized in his fell grip a score and more of the sleeping sons of men, and carried them home for meat. At break of day, the hall of Heorot rang loud and long with woe of warriors and grief of the great king. Here he comes. Thereafter, from dark lake and dripping caves, night after night over the misty moor came Grendel, gross and grim, famished for flesh. Empty the beds, no man dared sleep at Heorot. But Grendel smelt them out of their hiding place, and many a meal he made of warriors. For 12 years he waged war with Hrothgar, piling grief upon grief. For 12 years he haunted great Heorot. Now there lived overseas in the land of the gates a youth of valiance abounding, mightiest yet mildest of men, his name Beowulf, who, hearing of Grendel and minded to destroy him, built a boat of the stoutest timber and chose him warriors, 14 of the best. In shining armor they boarded the great vessel, beached on the shingle by the curling tide. Straightway they shoved her off. They ran up the white sail, and the wind caught her. The biting wind whipped her over the waves. Like a strong bird, the swan boat winged her way over the grey Baltic, the wintry whale road, till the lookout sighted land, a sickle of fair sand and glittering white cliffs. The keel struck the shingle, the warriors sprang ashore. But the watchman of the Danes, the lone cliff guardian, seeing them from afar, spurred his charger and came galloping down to the shore. He brandished his spear, and over the wind and wave roar loud he shouted, "Strangers from the whale road, who are you that dare, unbidden, unheralded, so boldly trespass here? Upon your flashing shields and the points of your spears I see the glint of death." And Beowulf answered, "We are from Sweden, O guardian of the shore. Fear not, for in loyalty we come, for friendly fields that tremble to the tale of your suffering and horror unspeakable. Crowding sail, hot haste, we are come with stout spears of ash wood and shields to protect you. God grant we rid you of Grendel, the grim monster. The watchman lowered his spear, and from smiling lips the wind blew to Beowulf fair words of greeting. Whoever serves my king is welcome here. Come, noble warriors, let me show you the way, and my men will look to your boat. They left her at anchor, the broad-bellied ship afloat on the bobbing tide, and followed him over the cliff toward Heorot as they marched, the boar-head glaring from their helmets, the iron rings rang on their mail-coats, and the watchman said, Behold, the huge hall, wide-gabled, the gleaming roof towering high to heaven. Follow the street to the studded door, where Wulfgar, herald of the king, will receive you. May God Almighty prosper your venture and hold you safe. He wheeled about on his horse and galloped away to the shore. Thus came the warriors to Heorot, and heavy with weariness, halted by the door. They propped their spears by a pillar. From blistered hands their shields slid clattering to the floor. Then Wulfgar, herald of the king, having demanded their errand, ran to his royal master, and quick returning urged them within. The long hall lay before them, the floor paved with stone, the roof high-raftered. In mournful state upon his throne sat brooding aged Hrothgar, gray-haired and bowed with grief. Slowly he raised his eyes, leaden, lusterless, and gazed upon the youth as his ringing step. Boldly he strode forth till he stood at his feet. O noble Hrothgar, giver of treasure, lord of the rousing war song, we bring you greeting, because we grieve deep for your desolation. Over the long paths of the ocean we have labored, I and my warriors, to rid you of the brute that nightly robs you of rest. I am no weakling. With my trusty blade I have slain a monster brood, and blindly at night many a foul sea beast that writhed and twisted in the bounding wave. I beg you to grant my wish. I shall not fail. Then Hrothgar stretched out his arms in welcome and took him by the hand and said, Beowulf, I knew you as a child, and who has not exulted in your fame as a fighter? It is a triumph song that ocean thunders to her farthest shore. It is a whisper in the frailest seashell. Now, like your princely father long ago, in the brimming kindness of your heart you have come to deliver us. But Unferth bristled at these words. Unferth, who sat always at the feet of Hrothgar, a groveling, jealous man who could not bear that anyone should win more fame than he. Braggart, he cried, are you not that Beowulf who failed against Breca in the swimming match? 7 nights you wallowed in the wintry sea. Some sport that was, sport for jeering waves that jollied you like spindrift from crest to crest, till sick with cold you shrieked for mercy. Who heard? Not Breca, who long since had battled to land, but the sea, tired at last of its puny plaything, spewed you ashore. Angrily Beowulf answered, That's a drunkard's tale. True, Breca was first ashore, but I could have raced him had I wished. We were boys then, with our full share of folly, plunging sword in hand, giddily to battle with monster whales, when a storm came sweeping down, and gruesome waves ground and trampled us under. It was Breca that cried for help. I fought to save him, but a fierce northeaster whipped us apart, and I saw him no more. In the dark and bitter cold, the icy brine was heaving murkily with monsters. Glad was I of my sword and mailcoat, for a serpent had wound his sinewy coils about my waist, and squeezing dragged me below. But before he could break me, I slew him, 9 others too before the raging flood tide rolled me to land. I am not aware that you, brave Unferth, can boast such a record. If you be as bold as you proclaim, tell me, how comes it that Grendel is still alive? Ha! I know a coward when I see one. Soon, if the king be willing, I shall grapple with Grendel and show you what courage means. Then Hrothgar, marking the warrior's blazing eyes and hasty hand, fingering his sword hilt, with mild words melted his anger. Noble Beowulf, pay no heed to Unferth, an envious wayward man unworthy of note. Right gladly I grant your wishes, but first, one word of warning. That sword you spoke of, it will avail nothing with Grendel, whose life is proof against all weapons whatsoever wrought by man. You must go for him with your hands, your bare hands. Thus spake King Hrothgar, and from his bounteous heart wished the youth well. Soon as the benches had been cleared away for banquet, he called for his queen. The gracious Wealhtheow, who proudly entering, was proudly hailed by a royal clarion of trumpets. A gown of broidered gold she wore, behind her a long train dark as the night sky, illuminated with galaxy of stars that, as she glided forward to greet her guests, trembled in the torchlight. The mead cup glowed in her hands, strong to revive them. Weary from wandering over the surging sea, kneeling, she offered it first to Beowulf, next to his warriors each in turn, and lastly to the Danes. They drank and they feasted. The jeweled goblets clashed in the great hall. There was loud revelry of heroes, bold merriment of men, and minstrel song, and the soothing voice of the harp. Till twilight, the drowsy hour of Grendel's coming, the black shape stealing over the dusky moor. Then the Danes, man by man, uprose, and clearing the banquet, brought for their guests soft couches, pillow-strewn with fleeces of thick wool. When the queen had departed, they hurried each to his secret hiding-place, and last of all, murmuring abundant blessing on Beowulf, gave the reluctant and noble Hrothgar. Straightway Beowulf stripped off his armor, his mail-coat, his shining helmet. His shield and precious sword gave he to his servant, and in the ring of warriors lay down to rest. But spent as they were, for tumult of Grendel and his havoc, like runaway hoos, making riot in their brains, they could not sleep. Under their fleeces in terror they sweated and trembled. Wide awake, till at last, outworn with weariness, heavy-lidded they slept. All but Beowulf. Alone he watched. Over the misty moor, from the dark and dripping caves of his grim lair, Grendel with fierce ravenous stride came stepping. A shadow under the pale moon he moved, that fiend from hell, foul enemy of God, toward Heorot. He beheld it from afar, the gleaming roof, towering high to heaven. His tremendous hands struck the studded door, wrenched it from the hinges till the wood splintered and the bolts burst apart. Angrily he prowled over the polished floor, a terrible light in his eyes, a torch flaming. As he scanned the warriors, deep drugged in sleep, loud he laughed, and pouncing on the nearest tore him limb from limb and swallowed him whole, sucking the blood in streams, crunching the bones. Half gorged, his gross appetite still unslaked, greedily he reached his hand for the next, little reckoning for Beowulf. The youth clutched it and fiercely grappled. Such torture as this the fiend had never known. In mortal fear he was minded to flee to his lair, but Beowulf prisoned him fast. Spilling the benches, they tugged and heaved, from wall to wall they hurtled, and the roof rang to their shouting. The huge hall rocked, the strong foundations groaned and trembled. Then Grendel wailed from his wound. His shriek of pain roused the Danes in their hiding and shivered to the stars. The warriors in the hall spun reeling from their couches. In dull stupor they fumbled for their swords, forgetting no man-made weapon might avail. Alone Beowulf tore Grendel's arm from his shoulder asunder, wrenched it from the root while the tough sinews cracked, and the monster roared in anguish, well knowing that deadly was the wound and his mortal days ended. Wildly lamenting, away into the darkness he limped, over the misty moor to his gloomy home. But the hero rejoiced in his triumph and wildly waved in the air his blood-soaked trophy. And the sun, God's beacon of brightness, banishing night, made glad the sky of morning. From near and far the Danes came flocking to Heorot to behold the grisly trophy, Grendel's right arm nailed to the wall, the fingertips outspread, with nails of sharpened steel and murderous spikes clawing the roof. Having drunk their fill of wonder, eagerly they followed his track to the lake, and there, spellbound, they stared at the water welling with blood, still smoking hot, where down to the joyous deep he had dived downward to death. And they praised Beowulf and swore that of all men under the sun beyond measure, mightiest was he and fittest to govern his people. Meanwhile, in the hall at Heorot, the grateful king, all glooming gone, his countenance clear and cloudless as the sky and open radiance of the climbing sun, gave thanks to God for deliverance. "Beowulf," he said, "bravest of men, I shall love you now as my son. All I have is yours for the asking. Take what treasure you will, but first let us feast and be merry." Straightway they washed the blood from the floor, propped up the battered door. The drooping walls they draped with embroidery, bright hangings of woven gold. There was drinking and feasting again, revelry of heroes, and the jeweled goblets clashed. At last the king, aged Hrothgar, gray-haired giver of treasure, ordered gifts to be brought. To Beowulf he gave a sword and mailcoat and a banner of gleaming gold, a plated helmet so tough no steel might cleave it. 8 prancing horses with golden harness and bridles of silver. The proudest saddled with his own battle seat, all set with splendid jewels, most cunningly inlaid. To each of the warriors a sword and bountiful recompense of gold for their fiend that Grendel slew. Then the minstrel sang of rousing deeds of old. Like flames in the firelight, the heart leapt to hear them. And when he had done all, and the harp lay silent, the queen of the Danes spoke out. Beowulf, dearest youth, son of most favored and fortunate of mothers, this your deed is matchless, greater than all these. In the farthest corners of the earth your name shall be known. Wherever the ocean laps the windy shore and the wave-worn headland, your praise shall be sung. And now the feast was ended. With final clarion of trumpets they left the hall, Hrothgar and his gracious queen leading Beowulf to a stately chamber to rest. But the Danes remained clearing the banquet. They brought couches spread with pillows and warm coverlets and lay down, each with his head shield at his head. Just broad shield at his head, his mailcoat, his spear and shining helmet, as was the custom long ere Grendel came. Now fearless of monster their minds were at ease, quiet as the summer sea, the sparkling water unmurmuring and serene under the moon. In comfort of spirit, in blessed trust and tranquility they sank to rest. Part 2. Grendel's mother. Over the misty moor, under the dark vault of heaven, a shadow came gliding, a she-monster, mother of Grendel. From the chill waters of the fenland, brooding on her grief, greedy for revenge, to Heorot she came and broke down the door, and mightily burst the bars asunder. The Danes in the darkness felt for their spears, with drowsy fumbling, their slow arms shackled heavily with sleep. A stride she measured over the polished floor to the wall, where Grendel's grisly arm was fixed, the fingertips outspread, splattered with blood. Fiercely she tore it from the nail, and, snatching a warrior from his couch in surly triumph, shouldered him, and swiftly, with double spoil, sneaked over the hills to her lair. But Beowulf, battle-weary, was sleeping in his chamber. Of this tumult he heard nothing. At sunrise he marched with his comrades to Hrothgar, to bring him morning greeting in the hall. But the gray-haired giver of treasure answered him sadly. Ask not for happiness, for grief is heaven's decree, and there is no singing in the morning stars. Brave Esher is dead, my counselor and friend, by Grendel's mother. As he slept, most foully, most treacherously slain, she made off with him over the moor to her den, to the lonely land where dwell the dark spirits, by paths of peril, by cloud-haunted hills where wolves go hunting, by windy cliffs where swollen torrents tumbling plunge headlong into the misty deep, the grumbling underwater. A mile beyond there lies an evil lake, no plummet has sounded, the margin all along with the roots entangled of tall trees. In gloomy splendor they rise, their branches feathered with frost. Yonder at night a horror can be seen, the cold flood on fire with candles kindling the dark till quenched at dawning to a gray smolder. Of that dread water no beast dare drink. The proud antlered deer, hard pressed in the chase with clamorous hounds at heel, would sooner die than touch it. Oh, weird and evil is the Grendel Lake. When stormy wind is stirring, the angry wave leaps up to lash the cloud, and the air darkens and the bloated heavens weep. My cat wakes up right then. Oh, Beowulf, dear as a son to me, you alone can deliver us, if you will. He ended, and Beowulf, proud youth of valiance abounding, spoke out, I am not afraid, O king. I snap my fingers in the face of death, for fame is worth the seeking. Then Hrothgar in gladness grasped him by the shoulder, and for his daring offered him bountiful reward, rings and bright armor and treasure manifold. But noble Beowulf, heedless of gain, hastily brushed the words aside and bade him be patient, and to the place of horror led him straightway. The king saddled his war steed, proud champion of the curling mane, and then, summoning his guard, led them from Heorot. Beside him in shining armor strode Beowulf and his warriors, and the wild moor was stunned with their tramping. The hills and the wolf crags rang as they marched with the clink of mailed men. By paths of peril he led them to the lonely land where the dark spirits dwell by the cloven mountain, and the cataract madly careering by the torrent tumbling in plunge perpetual over the dizzy brink to the darkness below. And at last they came to the lake, all lined with trees, with their plumage of frost and tangled trailing roots. Here, fixed on the cliff, they beheld a grisly sight. The head of noble Aesir, their counselor and friend, his white face channeled with tracery of red, his hair clotted and damp, mist cold, and below at their feet the dark water, foaming and gurgling, bubbling hot with blood. At once Beowulf unslung his battle horn and pressed it to his lips. The long shrill note cut the clean wind, the cold cliff, echoing, replied, whereat a weird head rose dripping from the lake and gazed upon Beowulf. With stony wondering eyes, then another, thick-crusted, bristling with scales, his tusks all hung with weed, and dragons too, bold sea-devils, all manner of evil monster, till all the lake was agleam with eyes, luminous, amazed. And now they were moving, long serpents looping the sluggish wave in slow undulation, heaving huge coils from the murky deep, and one, bolder than his fellows, came speeding toward them, slithering over the foam. The king marked him, and, swiftly fitting an arrow, let fly and struck to the heart. What a wailing was there as, thrashing its tail, mid showering spears it labored, slowly ashore, slowly and more slowly. They dragged it dead from the water, all stuck with steel to their feet, and lo, when they looked again, the lake was empty of monsters. Some the gluttonous pool had swallowed, while others over the rocks with angry howling scrambled to their dens. Then in a loud voice Beowulf cried, where is Grendel's mother? Ho there, she-devil, where, wolf of the lake, quit your hiding. He raised his battle horn and pressed it to his lips. The long shrill note cut the clean wind, the cold cliff, echoing, replied. No answer yielded the deep, but the water trembled, and the wave shuddered for fear. Again he cried, coward, do you shrink from battle? Must I plunge in the mare and seek you out myself? Then they clad him in armor, first his mailcoat, hand-wrought with iron links 100 on 100, strong to guard his body from the monster's grip. Next his helmet, with a boar's head glaring, plated with bands no blade could bite, sparkling with jewels to light his watery way. And Unferth, choosing to forget old quarrels, gave him his sword, with hilt of twisting gold, of steel infallible, fronting its name. A moment he stood, pondering, restless in mind, half given to gloom, then spoke. O noble Hrothgar, grey-haired giver of treasure, I am ready to depart. But whether it be that fronting shall win me fame or death devour me, I know not. For secret are the ways of fate, and her word final. But should I die, I beg you, look to my men, give to Unferth my sword, my treasure to Hygelac, my father. Farewell. Down he goes. He dived into the surge. The dark waves swallowed him. Downward he sank. Many a savage monster fastened upon him. With cruel tusk and talon ripped and slashed his mailcoat, while Grendel's mother, tyrant queen of that dismal realm, laughed in her lurking place deep at the bottom of the lake. Minded to slay him. Suddenly, lo, with arm outstretched, she launched upward straight for Beowulf and clutched him in her claw, and hugged him to her hairy chest, so smothering close he could not swing his sword, then downward dragged him deep down to her den. When the rushing ceased, he beheld paved floor and rolling at his feet. Under the lake in a lofty hall he stood, whose roof, buttressed with stout rafters, upheld the weight of water. No drop from above could reach him, and dreamily, oh dreamily, in his ear sounded the far-off oozy murmur of the flood. Before him huge flames were leaping, and horrid shadows dancing in the firelight, whence issued a shape more massy than the rest, dark-shouldered, towering high, like a mountain hiding the sun. 'Twas the foul she-monster, werewolf of the deep. Then drew he his sword, Hrunting, the death dealer, prince of 1,000 fights. The edge of steel slashed home, with clash upon clash it dinned its greedy battle cry into her skull, yet failed him, crumpling like a reed. Fearless he flung it aside, and trusting the strength of his hands, seized her by the hair. Wrestling swung her heavily this way and that, buffeting and bruising the walls with her crude bulk. Then bent her to the ground. In a trice up she reared her shaggy frame, and grappling squashed him down. Then like a dizzy sailor trapped him in the shrouds, where sea and heaven swing sickening past as a sudden wave, top-heavy, grinds him down into the world, clinging madly, yet struggling all the while to fight free. So Beowulf under the whelming monster was prisoned fast. But she, softly keening, brooded upon Grendel, her son, her only son, whom long ago by the lapping water tenderly herself had suckled, whom as a babe she had fended from brute assault, and loved more than her own life, whom Beowulf had slain. Boiling for revenge she drew her knife, the broad blade glinting in the firelight, her eyes gloating, and struck home. Then surely must Beowulf have died there in the monster's hall under the joyless water. But his mailcoat, looped and ragged though it was, guarded his life-house, and God Almighty in his wisdom set him free. The warrior sprang up. On the wall, gleaming, he spied a tremendous sword, by giants of olden time forged in the furnace of the sun, undimmed in luster. So cumbrous huge only a hero could wield it. He grabbed the golden hilt, and wheeling mightily, smote with all his strength. Splintering her bone rings, the blade hacked through her neck, and felled her at his feet, stone dead. Then great Beowulf rejoiced. Fierce as the summer sun blazed the steel in his hand, a beacon of brightness lighting the way. Triumphant he traversed that dismal underworld, till suddenly he saw the body of Grendel lying, the shoulder agape where the arm had wrenched away. Grim reminder of old griefs. How often had Grendel, famished for flesh, stolen upon Heorot, and breaking the door, seized in his fell grip a score and more of the sleeping sons of men, and carried them home for meat. Oh, cruel spoil! Stung by the memory, he raised the magic sword and struck off the ghastly head. Then a wonder befell. So poisonous, so burning hot the blood, the blade melted, as frost in the sunlight, or as ice melts when God the Father unfetters the prisoned flood. It wasted, it withered, till only the hilt remained. But the blood cascaded upward, curdling the waters, and the poisoned wave broke red on the brink at the feet of the weary watchers. Then Whitebeard shook their heads and muttered sadly that Beowulf for his daring had died, and Hrothgar, his mind clouded with the great gloom, lamented that they had lost one matchless in valor, dear to him as a son. Gathering his followers from the grim headland, slowly he led them home. Only the comrades of Beowulf lingered on, sick at heart, with deep longing and despair scanning the troubled water. Meanwhile, the prince, dragging the monster's head, dived upward. Behind him a myriad bubbles and sparkling trail bejeweled his victorious path, and bursting, purged the water of poison. With sturdy stroke upward he rose, till his hand broke the surface, his arm upheaving the huge head, and he swam lustily to land. The warriors cried out for joy. They shouted, they thanked God, they ran to meet him, they splashed into the water, and with impatient hands pulled him ashore. Speedily they stripped away his armor, helmet, and mailcoat. Grendel's head they spiked upon a spear, no light burden for 4 stalwart henchmen staggering to bear. Then departed from those waters in such wondrous wise, cleansed of evil, now silent, without stir of brute or tiniest wave, marble still. From that lonely island over the mountain they marched, by cataract madly careering, by paths of peril, over the desolate hills and wolf crags, over the wild moor homeward to Heorot. And Hrothgar, who in mournful state on his throne was sat brooding, bowed in grief, his heart bleak as a ruin, where the wind makes riot, while in the wintry wood the night owl cries. Hrothgar, roused suddenly by their shout of triumph, flung wide the studded door, and beheld on the threshold Beowulf holding high Grendel's ghastly head. The Danes gazed in horror. The mead cups fell clattering to the floor. And boldly through the hall with ringing step the warrior strode till he stood at the king's feet. Ta-da! Oh, Beowulf, you're alive. Lo, noble Hrothgar, prince of the Spear Danes, 2 trophies I bring you for lasting token of a glorious deed. This head, and shrunk to a hilt, the sword that severed it. With proud gladness Hrothgar received it, golden remnant of the giant's work, and he praised Beowulf and thanked God for his deliverance. That the long struggle with the monsters was ended at last. Then there was rich feasting, exchange of treasure, loud revelry of heroes with rousing voice, the minstrel sang the mighty deeds of Beowulf. And the joyous sun, bright candle of the world, soared high to heaven. The meadow by the sea rang jubilant with prancing horses, loud with harness bells as Beowulf marched his warriors to the shore. And when they beached the shingle, the broad-bellied ship beside the curling tide, his heart leapt for home. Now was the hour of leave-taking, and he spoke. Noble Hrothgar, of all men most learned in grave courtesy, sadly we bid you farewell. If in any way by deeds of battle I can win greater love, if over the bounding wave I hear word that neighbors oppress you or enemies grind you under heel, then with 1,000 thanes' hot haste will I speed, and 1,000 spears and 1,000 shields to protect you. And Hrothgar answered him, O strong in wisdom, mightiest yet mildest of men, valiant Beowulf, never have I known a youth speak more nobly of battle, more bravely. You forged between our peoples so fast a bond that all treason and bloodshed of bygone years will cease. Henceforth our minds, not choked with hatred like a thunder sky, but in mutual trust abiding, shall beget peace. The barren sea between us shall blossom with ships, with throng of masts, a forward winged sail, all laden with treasure, love token of friends, and many a man shall greet his fellow with gifts over the surging water, the seagull's way. Then Hrothgar, the gray-haired king, giver of treasure, embraced him, clinging to his neck and weeping bitterly, as if his heart should break. When the Danes had shoved her clear of the shingle, the warriors leapt aboard. They ran up the white sail, and the wind caught her. The biting wind whipped her over the waves, with timbers groaning, her curved prow scattering the foam. Like a strong bird, the swan boat winged her way over the gray Baltic, the wintry whale rode, over the long paths of the ocean, on and ever onward, till at last they beheld the shining cliffs of home. The coast guard, spent with long weary watching, hailed them from afar. The keel struck the sand. Proud, exultant, the warriors leapt to land. The fire dragon. After Hygelac, I've never known how to say Beowulf's dad. Hygelac was dead and Heroded had been slain. Then Beowulf, strong in valor and his wisdom, mightiest yet of men, for 50 years reigned over his people in peace and prosperity unchallenged. From youth of fighting and heroic deeds, quietly he journeyed toward the tomb until, old at last, like a mighty oak in winter, flaunting no longer her green midsummer glory, but stripped and bare, yet splendid still, he hoped to die in peace, but vainly. You shall hear how there came a dragon to confound his quiet flying by night, scorching the dark of wings of fire. There was a headland that towered above the sea, and upon it a burial mound, blocked with barriers and turreted with rock that none might enter, none save the dragon, who dwelt there, lone guardian of a treasure no man had seen. One night, as he lay within coiled in slumber, boldly, cunningly crept in a stranger. From the dim vault blazed upon him a wonder of wealth, jeweled flagons, bowls graven with weird imagery, golden goblets whose shine the long centuries had not tarnished. From many a battered helmet the boar's head glaring, and thick with rust the iron-ringed mailcoat, whispering of old wars, of the clashing of shield and the bite of a flashing sword. One goblet he stole, and a heap of rings and stealthily made off. Then the dragon, twilight foe, fiery flyer in darkness, awoke. Tricked of his treasure, angrily he prowled over the headland, sniffing the ground, devouring the track of his enemy, but none could he find. At nightfall, when the day star was darkened, the candle of the world snuffed out, revengeful, riotous with rage, he went forth in flame, breathing out ruin, snorting hurricane, villages he burnt. He laid waste the land, the palace of Beowulf, proud gift throne of his people, he swamped in waves of fire. Oh, terrible was the king's anger in his heart, the wrathful embers flared. He commanded an iron shield to be made, for well he knew that linden wood must warp and shrivel in heat. With 11 chosen warriors he marched to the dragon's den, the mound on the headland, beside the surging sea. Upon a hillock he sat and waited for the dragon, while over his troubled mind mistily moved, as in a mirror, his youth and many deeds of glory, himself a mere boy, plunging sword in hand giddily to battle with monster whales, with Grendel grappling to the death under the joyless water upon Grendel's mother, wheeling the giant's blade, breaking her bone rings, hacking through her neck, and now, blotting all else, death in shape of dragon in the mound bestirring, pressing relentless upon him in clouds of fire, dissolving all the dream of his life. Unafraid, he waited, yet, as never before, with no blaze of battle in his soul, nor blood yearning, nor champing of steed, nor delirious charge of chariot wheels, only a deep brooding sadness as he pondered upon death. Then for the last time he spoke to his warriors, greeting them man by man. Dearest comrades, I am ready now. Let the dragon face me if he dare. I wish I could fight him with my hands as I fought Grendel, but his breath is fire, all swollen with poisonous blasts, and I need my battle steel, my stout mailcoat and thick-plated shield. You, my warriors, my chosen ones, whose dancing eyes are like spear points, or the swoop of the hawk on his prey, hold back. Stand patient on the headland and watch. This fight is none of yours. No man can play the hero, pit his might against the monster. No man but myself. I shall not yield an inch. My courage surely shall kill and win the treasure, unless fate, whose word is final, to whom in obedience unquestioned even kings must bow, shall deal me death. Then the hero, stern under his gleaming helmet, with his stout mailcoat and thick-plated shield, strode out to meet his foe. Toward the mound he moved. Thank you, Gar. This is perfect. The rock rampart cleft with arch of stone. Close by, strongly from the earth, gushed out a stream, whose wash boiled to fury in the dragon's furnace breath. Dropped to the steamy ground, so scalding fierce, so hissing hot that Beowulf could tread no further, he halted. In a loud voice he shouted his battle cry. Then the dragon awoke. Crackling he uncurled like the clash of shield upon shield. He uncoiled his scaly length. With thunder-clapping sound he twisted through the arch, spitting flame. He blackened the rampart. He scorched and burned the grass, as round and round madly he bounded upon the bruised ground. Then Beowulf, wreathed in smoke and fire, ran upon the dragon. Shielded, brandishing his sword, he struck him mightily. The keen edge bit on the scales and glanced aside, but roused his dreadful wrath. Uprearing, he flapped wide his monstrous wings, fanning the blaze tenfold, like a forest fire, tree ravenous, devouring all in its path. He bore down on the pygmy king till Beowulf, choked in that frenzy of smoke and flame, scarce could breathe. He stumbled. He gasped for air. Then the warriors, his friends on the headland, chieftains' sons whom he himself had chosen, when they saw their king sore pressed, his strength waning, forsook him. In terror for their lives they took to the woods, all but Wiglaf, chosen kinsman of the king, whose spirit, fashioned in stronger mold, cried out that his master should thus suffer. His hand seized the shield, the frail linden wood. He drew his sword, proud heirloom of his fathers, and called to his comrades, "Stay, fellow warriors. The king needs us, now as never before. Is this the time to desert him? Have you forgotten the gifts he gave us in the mead hall when we feasted together? The gold rings, the shields and flashing swords? Have you forgotten that solemnly we swore to protect him from peril? Us alone he chose for this venture, named us of all his spearmen the bravest. Turn now, O my comrades, and fight. But they shrank from his chiding and cringed among the trees. Ooh. Then cried he in torment of soul, Shame upon you. Did I skip a part? No. Then he cried in torment, Shame upon you. Do your coward hearts knock at your ribs so loud you cannot hear me? Or do you not wish to hear? Is your master no more to you than carcass meat for monsters? I'd rather my body were burnt to a cinder than stand by to see him slain. For him be my hand now, my helmet, my sword, my mailcoat, all for him. And he called into the smoke and fire, Beloved king, whose name is known in the farthest corners of the earth, wherever the ocean laps the windy shore and the wave-worn headland, remember the boast of your youth, never to yield, never to fail in striving. Wake the old might of your hands. He plunged into the smoke until he stood where he loved best to be, by his master's side. In the whiplash and flogging of flames, steadfast together they fought. Between the king and the fiery dragon he thrust his linden shield. The lightning licked it, shriveled it up like shavings thrown to the fire. Then might Wiglaf have perished, but Beowulf housed him under his iron shield, and rousing his old might, raised high the sword and struck the dragon. Too strong was the hand, the steel was shivered to pieces. With savage haste, the dragon, old twilight foe, in whirlwind conflagration rushed upon him. Deep into his neck he plunged his spiked teeth. The lifeblood spurted, welled red over his armor. Then Wiglaf, as love for his lord flashed into rage, unshielded sprang at the beast. Into that fiery furnace he thrust his sword. With scorched fingers drove it under the scales, home to the hilt. And the dragon fell back, his breathing labored, the fire puffs ponderous and slow. Then Beowulf, master of his waning might, drew from his mailcoat his keen battle knife. Locked in combat with his foe, he struck at the heart. So smiting with Wiglaf, he felled him. Together they quenched the fire, together beat out his loathsome life. O valiant, valiant knight, who at king's peril never did falter, such should a warrior strive to be. 'Twas the last victory that fell to the king, the last of his works in this world. As, faint from fighting, he sank down by the wall, his wound began to swelter and swell. The pestilent poison climbed to his heart. Then Wiglaf ran for water. Unloosing the helmet, he bathed the blood from his face and roused him from the swoon. His master, his beloved king, who, far gone in weariness, with distant eyes gazed upon Wiglaf, well knowing his mortal day was ended and death was very near. Slowly he spoke. No son have I to succeed me, none to inherit this armor of mine, scarred with 1,000 battles. Now as I lay dying here under the arch that giants long ago hewed from the white cliff, these thoughts bring me comfort. Full 50 winters have I governed my people, guided and guarded them. Never in the wide world was there king or warrior could match me in the field or make me quake with fear. Blameless my life has been. No blood of kinsman have I shed, nor sworn falsely, nor played the traitor. The ruler of men shall charge me with no crime. But my wound grows cold. Go quickly, dear Wiglaf, under the grey stone to the treasure within. Now the dragon is dead, despoil him. Bring me banquet of jewels to feast my hungry eyes. Quickly, before I die. All haste Wiglaf obeyed his wounded king. Stooping under the arch, he entered the mound, the dragon's grim lair. Therein what wonder of wealth he saw, gold glittering in the darkness, lavish litter of goblets, dim now and lustreless, their proud plating perished. Jewels like jungle eyes from the dim walls sparkling, many a rusty helmet and bracelet of twisted gold, over all in drooping folds suspended, a gold banner most cunningly sewn, rarest of prizes, radiant with light. Then Wiglaf loaded his lap with treasure, with flagons and goblets, and seizing the banner, bright beacon for his path, in headlong haste brought them to the king. But Beowulf had swooned away, almost had death. Covetous for the hero's soul, stolen him hence when Wiglaf dashed water in his face and woke him. Wearily the aged eyes, from crowding shadows peering, fastened on the gold. For the last time, haltingly in deep anguish, the hero spoke. Thanks be to God, the King of Glory, that he granted before death day this treasure for my people. The price of it, an old man's life. 'Tis fair exchange. You, Wiglaf, must share it among them, for I shall be gone. Share it according to their need. One final word. When I am dead, stack high about my body the funeral fires, and bid my warriors to build upon my ashes, yonder on the whale's headland, towering high to heaven, a mighty mound. It shall be named the Mound of Beowulf. Brave seafarers, driving over the dark ocean, shall behold it from afar, and remembering, marvel at my deeds. Thus he spoke, and fumbling for the gold chain that hung at his neck, with ice-cold quivering fingers pressed it upon Wiglaf, and beside it his gleaming boar's head helmet, his gold ring and mailcoat, bidding him to use them well. Dear cousin, you are the last of their line, our noble Waegmundings, royal house of Sweden. The rest has fate, swept to their doom. Princes, proud warriors, great kings in their glory, all to their doom. Now I follow after. Then the valiant spirit passed from the body, winging to heaven. And noble Wiglaf, unmanned by grief, his heart near to breaking, looked down at his master, while the coward warriors, their cheeks smarting with shame one by one, crept from the forest, bringing their shields and armor where the dead king lay. In troubled silence they watched as Wiglaf, in vain endeavor to revive him, dashed water in his face. But no mortal man can change the will of God. For all his bitter longing, the youth could not bring him back. Suddenly he rounded upon them. Fierce love for his lord flashed into rage, his words lashed like a whip. Fine requital this for his gifts in the mead hall. To think he called you brave, the flower of warriors, that you swore to protect him. What mockery that was! Why, with your help we could have plucked him from the fire. Oh, grimly, grimly was this treasure won. No, your fingers must not soil it. You shall be stripped of your rights, outlawed from our love. Better a man should die than live a coward's life. They answered not a word, but shambled away, their faces, for all their crimson shame, blank as white walls, as if they cared no more for anything in the world. Sadly to the whales' headland, the people came to gaze on their dead king. Through tears they beheld him, the valiant hero, wrapped in his mailcoat of blood, on the smoky grass beside him. Over 50 feet outspread, the charred dragon consumed in his own fire. Never again would he on wings of flame wheel through the darkness, burning with his breath, laying waste the land. Round him were scattered flagons and goblets of gold, many a sword rusty with long lying in the tomb of the earth. Oh, accursed was that treasure! Bought with the king's life, grim was the bargain. The dragon's cumbrous body was straining shoulder together. They shoved to the cliff edge and heaved over, whistling down the air. Far below it struck the ocean. The waves swallowed it. The flood tide washed it away. But Beowulf, the gray-haired warrior, with hands of love they lifted, and to the whale's headland tenderly carried him. And they raised him a funeral pyre, staked firmly in the ground and hung with helmets, with shield and shining mailcoat, such ornament of war as he had most desired. On the high summit they laid him, the matchless hero, their beloved king, and with pinewood torches soaked in turpentine kindled the wood. The fire flickered, the timber crackled, and the strong wind fanned the blaze, till lo! All heaven was roaring flame, ravenous lips licking, loudly devouring the body of Beowulf, hot to the heart. But louder was the noise of weeping, a nation lamenting her leader, an aged wife in deep anguish and dread of lonely days bewailing her loss, and the wild sea wind was hushed. In the morning a huge mound they heaped upon his ashes, as Beowulf had bidden, a peak upon the whale's headland, wide and lofty, that brave seafarers driving over the dark ocean might behold it from afar and cry, "Look yonder, the mound of Beowulf the hero," and remembering marvel at his deeds. 10 days they labored to build it, and raised about the rim a rampart of boulders, bearing the treasure beneath, jeweled flagons, gold rings, and goblets, all that wonder of wealth, for there was a curse upon it, no man dare keep it. Then 12 warriors, proud heirs of noblemen, rode their horses about the mound, loudly praising their lord for his valiant deeds. Oh, it is fitting that a man should praise his dead master and lock him in his heart. So did the warriors. Of all the kings in the world, Beowulf they named the mightiest in valor, in his ways the mildest, most kind to his people, and keenest for praise. The end. So, that is the story of Beowulf. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this video relaxing and very exciting. And I hope that you have a very good